Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the NeoLoad 4.1 webinar. My name is Jonathan Bracken. I'm the VP of Marketing here at Neotis, and I'm joined today by Steve Weisfeller, Senior Performance Engineer. I'll get started with a brief introduction of NeoLoad 4.1. Then Steve's going to cover the feature highlights, and we'll quickly get into a demo of some of the new capabilities. We'll then wrap it up with a live Q&A. So if you have any questions during the presentation, please go ahead and enter them into the question panel in the GoToWebinar widget on your screen. We'll get to as many questions as we can at the end of the demo. So needless to say, we're very excited about this new release of NeoLoad. And as with our major release, NeoLoad 4.0 earlier this year, 4.1 is heavily influenced by our customers. Through polling, survey, and interview results, our product team gathered a range of enhancement requests. They added to market research. They came up with a host of new features which fit primarily into one of four categories. Broader mobile capabilities. This was also obviously a huge major trend that we saw in the market research. Added technology support, more enterprise features, and some third-party integrations as well. So we've added a number of features designed to directly address these requests from customers. And I'll turn it over to Steve to talk about some of the highlights. But first, we have a quick poll question for you related to some of the market research that we did. And if you could just please submit your answer to the poll question on your screen, we'll get into the feature highlights as soon as possible.
And just a couple more seconds here, folks, to fill out the poll if you may. And we'll get in and talk a little bit about some of the features of 4.1. A couple more people still filling it out. All right, very good. So welcome, everybody. As Jonathan mentioned, my name is Steve Weisfeldt. I'm a member of the performance engineering team here at Neotis. And just really a quick slide to talk about some of the new features of 4.1, and then I'll actually go into NeoLoad and take a look at some of these new features and functions themselves. As Jonathan alluded to, some improvements around the mobile space. It's interesting to see some of the results of that last poll. Quite a few of you have either plans in place or processes in place already to do some development testing of mobile applications. So fits in right along with what we've sort of expected and heard from the audience. We have some new features to address some of the problems that we've had with recording mobile applications, which I'll show a little bit of in the demonstration, as well as some new network emulation features, which will give us even more of a realistic network scenario when we're conducting our load tests. As customers of NeoLoad know already, we've always sort of prided ourselves on the ability to stay or ahead of the technology curve, and 4.1 is no different. We're now supporting some newer technologies, for example, Google Speedy. We'll talk about that in a little bit. HTML5, of course, some of the new push technologies that are coming out, and some improved ability to handle JSON responses as well. Some new license features. Won't really get into much of a demonstration here, but talk to them a little bit. We've improved our licensing in a couple of different places. We've fixed some issues that have existed where if you've checked out a license from our license server, for example, and the communication between the client and the server has broken, as you know, or you may know, it's historically been a bit of a painful process because you need to involve our licensing team to sort of reinitialize your license. That goes away. Now we have a feature where there's a timeout built in, so if the connectivity is lost, license isn't checked in after a certain amount of time, it's automatically checked in and you won't have those problems anymore. We've also introduced integration with Ldap, such that you can create sort of privileges, if you will, as to what certain users in your community can do. So you might have 3 or 4 testers on your team, for example, and you want to limit a couple testers to only be able to run load tests with a certain number of virtual users, or on a certain day, or certain other kinds of permissions. So that all the kind of bells and whistles that you'd want to control the allowance of usage, if you will, are now implemented as part of a licensing feature as well. Some third-party integrations. We've heard from our customer base for quite some time that they'd like to be able to better manage their testing processes, or include their load testing with NeoLoad as part of their testing procedures and management already. So integration into HP Quality Center will allow you to do that. All the scheduling and management aspects you would expect from a tool are now integrated into the Quality Center suite. Exporting test data and importing external results. I'm going to show that to you in a little bit. A lot of really cool features in 4.1. I think the importing of the external monitoring data might be my personal favorite, but let's take a look at some of these things now. So I'm going to take you through quite a few of the new features. I won't touch on all of them. I'm not necessarily going to go or proceed in any particular order of importance. I want to sort of just go in a logical fashion. So I'll talk to the design phase first, the runtime phase, and then finally the results session. Before we begin, there are a couple more poll questions real quickly here to talk about some of the things that we've addressed already. A couple minutes to finish this first poll question, then we have a final one before we actually look at the tool itself. Great. And then finally, leading up to the conversation of Speedy, one final question for you to address, if you may, and then we'll get in and take a look at NeoLoad 4.1. All right, very good. We appreciate your feedback. This is, as Jonathan alluded to earlier, very helpful for us in helping guide NeoLoad in future versions. So let's take a look at 4.1. Obviously, it looks very similar to 4.0. And as I mentioned, I'm going to kind of take you through the features sort of from the left-hand phase to the right-hand phase. First of all, let's talk a little bit about the new tunnel mode. Not really a demonstrable thing, but historically, there's been some challenges when trying to record mobile applications. As we saw in the polls, quite a few are doing mobile testing. If you want to record from the mobile device, you've previously been limited to recording from mobile devices that have proxy settings. Of course, you know that the NeoLoad recorder acts as a proxy. So if you actually work on a device that doesn't have a proxy setting, or a native application that doesn't allow you to change the proxy, you haven't actually been able to record that application. With NeoLoad 4.1, we introduced this tunnel mode now. And all I can really do is show you the radio button here. And what this now does is create an actual tunnel on the recorder device, the controller, wherever you're actually using the recorder, so that you can now, instead of working on the proxy or modifying the proxy of the mobile device itself, we just make a quick change to the DNS. And so that's obviously something we can do on all phones. And then by making that modification, we can now record from your mobile device. So now this allows us to get at applications that are running on devices that we weren't able to do before because of a proxy setting, or even record native applications now that are not necessarily web-based, but are still something that you want to test. What I recommend for you folks that are working with mobile applications is take a look at 4.1 and engage one of us on the professional services or the sales engineering pre-sales team here, and we can help you configure that. It's quite powerful and quite cool. So that's the tunnel mode. Some other interesting things that we've added to the design phase, you may notice that on the runtime parameter section here, this menu is changed a little bit. The when an error occurs and when an assertion fails now gives a little bit more control. And instead of just either doing nothing or going to the next iteration, as in previous versions of NeoLoad, we now have the ability to stop and start a new virtual user. Prior to this, we never had a way to reinitialize a virtual user, so that if a user fails and you have a requirement that you want to perform that user's init again, we can use stop and start a new virtual user, and it'll take care of that for me automatically. We have a new variable in our variable manager, which is a JavaScript variable. So if you have a need where some result of a variable is dependent upon a JavaScript, we can actually now embed our JavaScript into our variable manager, create a new variable such that whenever the variable is called within my user profile, it will execute the JavaScript as defined and evaluate to whatever the result of the function is. What's also additionally cool is because it is a variable in our variable manager, is all the normal change policies will apply. So this is going to simplify things quite a bit for folks that are doing some JavaScript activity. On the technology side, for those of you folks that are doing any kind of development where your application is returning JSON content, as you probably are aware, this has been pretty painful to work with NeoLoad in terms of doing extractions or validations, because what has happened is the JSON content, if I can show you a response really quickly, is just a long text string of values separated by double quotes and curly braces. So this is an example of a user profile that I recorded with NeoLoad 4.0. So here's what this JSON response would look like. You can't format it any better. It's just the way that it is. In 4.1, we actually now turn this into XML. So that same exact response that you just saw, if I recorded this in NeoLoad 4.1, would look like an XML format. So obviously this becomes significantly easier to do all the extractions and validations and verifications that you would normally do on response content when working with JSON. So a huge productivity gain there. And if you folks have any experience like I do trying to write variable extractors with JSON in earlier versions of NeoLoad, it's a little bit of a cumbersome sort of thing, to say that, to put it mildly. In the Check Virtual User window, we've introduced a couple new features which are we'll do some productivity gains for you. You see this difference column here. This difference column will, when you play back your user profile, will display a percentage difference if the recorded request is different than the replayed request. So if you are looking for responses that might be different from the recorded value, instead of having to step by step and looking at all the HTML rendering or comparing all the responses, we could just take a look at this difference field. You can see if I scroll down, I've got some in here someplace. So you can take a look, and that can make your evaluation sort of drill down to where you might need to do some customization a lot more productive, a lot more easier. We can also look for requests upon playback that are different from our recorded requests or responses based on a certain tolerance using our flag. So our flag feature has increased or expanded a little bit. So we now have this response difference field. So I can sort of set a tolerance such that if the replayed response was different from the recorded response by some difference that I specify, the flag will become turned on or off. And you can see that my flagging check marks are turned on and off as I change this tolerance. So again, that can be much of a productivity gain in terms of identifying responses that might be different from recording. We've also added this new recorded HTML rendering feature. So as you know, in earlier versions of NeoLoad, we have this HTML rendering. It takes a response code and displays it for you just nice and slick like this. But we can also now display the recorded HTML rendering. So if there's any reason to compare visually the HTML or XML rendering of a replayed user profile compared to a recorded, we can take a look at the two of them as such. But also, with this compared HTML rendering, it will visually show me the differences of the two. So I don't have to get under the hood and look at the HTTP code or whatever the client or protocol level code is. I can look at it graphically now much faster using the differences column, and this compare HTML rendering tab will allow me to very quickly drill down and figure out and find where there might be responses that are different as I expected to. So some design enhancements that will make your lives easier for sure. On the population side, couple of things on both the browser selection speed and on the network emulation side. On the browser, just really quickly, as I mentioned, we do have now support for Speedy. So of the audience that was here, it seemed to be kind of split as to people that are thinking about Speedy and those that aren't. Speedy is a new Google technology where, in short, what they're trying to do is they're trying to limit the number of concurrent connections between a browser and a web server, and be able to increase the amount of data that goes through one of those threads. So the same amount of data would be passed back and forth, but with less concurrency, less thread count, so less impact on a server. Something that's very new. I recommend, if it's something you're interested in, Google's got quite a few white papers published, and there's all kinds of information out on the internet that might be interesting to you. But by virtue of our ability to handle Speedy, and we are the first load testing tool to be able to handle Speedy, we can actually test to see whether the improvements that are promised by Speedy actually are realized. So in the Speedy implementation, you'll need to actually turn Speedy on in the browser and on the server. So by turning it on in the browser, you can indicate so in the NeoLoad checkbox like that, and that would emulate obviously a browser with Speedy turned on. It would be up to your server folks to turn it on the server side, but you can turn the combinations on and off, run the same load test again, and compare results and see whether or not that the Speedy implementation actually is increasing performance as you expect before you go into production. So that's the one technology feature on the browser side. On the network emulation side, we've got a really cool new ability which will make your load significantly more accurate than you have been testing already. The connection speeds, of course, are not anything new. We've been able to emulate many different internet connection speeds for many versions of NeoLoad now. But what NeoLoad 4.0 introduces is a new WAN emulation piece. So in addition to emulating the actual connection speed, we're now able to emulate network conditions such as latency and drop packets, both on the upload side and on the download side. You see we've got these parameters here which are customizable to be able to introduce these conditions on your network. So the solution that folks have had to use before NeoLoad 4.1, if they want to add that network latency to be part of real-world load test, is to use third-party tools. Oftentimes it's a hardware appliance. It's very hard to maintain, very costly, and it's just a separate process. Instead, now we have everything folded into NeoLoad. I can do all the customization within this interface. This is essentially especially important when dealing with mobile devices. And if I look at any of the wireless connection speeds, you'll notice that we've already got built in the sort of predefined average latency and packets drop that you would expect when dealing with these different devices. We can also customize the signal strength to choose better or worse connections. If you think about you're using your mobile device in your phone and you're passing a cell tower or going under a bridge, or things that might actually influence the connection parameters on the fly, we can emulate that all as well. So a huge step forward in terms of being able to get even more accurate in our load testing, because now not just accurately generating the traffic from a user standpoint, but able to introduce real-world network conditions on the load as well. More accurate tests, better results, higher quality application. In the run phase, we've got one interesting feature, kind of a minor thing, but I think think people will like it quite a bit. You remember now in 4.0 we introduced the ability when you're running your load test, you could actually increase or decrease the number of virtual users. And if you remember, this actually pops up a text box and you can introduce a new number in on the fly, increase or decrease the number of users. But what you weren't able to do was control which VUs were the ones that were terminated if you ratcheted down the number of active virtual users. In NeoLoad 4.1 we have this new stop feature. So if you recall, when we execute a load test, there'll be a line item for every load generator, every virtual user in this dialog. We now have the ability to select one and stop it on the fly. So a greater degree of control if there's a particular error that's erroring out because it's got an invalid login credential or some other reason. We don't want to stop the load test, but yet we want to control which virtual user we stop. We now have that ability within NeoLoad 4.1. On the results side, some things that Jonathan mentioned and I showed you in my slide, one of which is on the Values tab. We now have the ability to kind of structure this data in a more readable format. So this would or should look familiar to you. This is all the elements that we collect, all the data for all the elements as collected during a run test, but it's very tabular. We now have this new tree view structure so that I can analyze my results in a little bit more of a meaningful fashion. Let me just drag this open here for you so you can see all the elements are now represented as they are designed in the design phase. All the data is here for you, so it allows you to kind of take another view or another stab at your data from a different point of view, be able to get into the meat of your results a little bit more productively. On our graphs, something else folks have been asking for quite some time, we now have the ability to toggle the x-axis here, such that it can be a relative time from the start of the load test, or it can be the absolute time as determined by the timestamp of the controller. So to toggle this time on the x-axis, simply change the properties, and you can see that I can make this relative or absolute depending upon what my particular needs are. So again, comparing results from two different tests, probably relative time might not be the best way. Absolute time depends upon, of course, your particular instance, but depending upon what it is you're comparing or what you are looking to have on your x-axis here, this is very customizable. And then finally, what like I alluded to earlier, what I think is probably my favorite feature is the ability now to import external monitor data. So as you know, sometimes when we're trying to collect monitoring data from NeoLoad's monitoring engine, we have sometimes network configuration issues where the tier might be on the opposite side of a firewall that we can't get to for security reasons, or it just might take too long to open up holes in the firewall, etc., etc. So what we now have the ability to do is using standard monitoring tools like perfmon, for example, on a tier inside the firewall, we can save the data in a CSV file and import that now into NeoLoad to be able to analyze it and correlate it just as if it was a metric that was collected by a NeoLoad monitor. So in the reporting tools, we have a new feature here called import data, as you can see. And we can select a couple different formats, which you can ultimately then import. I won't bother to make you sit and watch an import. It takes a few minutes. But once you've got this data imported, it now is rendered into the monitor tree view just as if it was data collected from a normal NeoLoad monitor. So this should look familiar to you, this monitor window here. The SCWPC is my local controller, my local load generator. So this was data that was collected by the Tomcat monitor built into the NeoLoad monitoring modules. The SCWPC you see here is actually data that I imported from Windows perfmon. So you can see from a tree view standpoint, looks exactly the same, and I can drop and drag this data that was represented by a CSV file onto the same graph, just as if it was any other sort of data. So I'll be able to correlate and compare data now from tiers they weren't able to otherwise get. Opens up a whole, I was going to say can of worms, a whole new avenue to be able to fully realize the analysis of your backend as you're going through your application. And finally, we've increased the ability to export data. So before, in our exporting tool, we were only able to export certain values. Now our export tool allows us to basically control what elements I wish to collect or take the whole set of data to be exported into an external file if that's something that you so choose to do. So quick little summary, of course, of NeoLoad 4.1. Final slide to show you folks here. To get 4.1, if you haven't already, simple to download from our download page. NeoLoad 4.1 does install automatically into a separate directory from 4.0. It's not an override, so you can install both concurrently. You just can't run both concurrently. And then finally, it does require a new license key, which you can log into the customer portal using your customer authentication. The keys are already in your account. Just download them, install them into 4.1, and you should be good to go. When you convert a project from 4.0 to 4.1, it's not backwards compatible. So if for some reason you think you might want to also work on your project in 4.0, you might just make sure it's best practice to back it up first and then load it into 4.1. You'll be prompted with a message that says something to the effect of, are you sure you want to convert to the new version? And once you do, you'll be able to run it in 4.1. But again, that now no longer is backwards compatible to 4.0. So hopefully this is a great overview. Some really cool features in NeoLoad. If you haven't taken a look at it already, grab it quick. And if you have any questions, I'd recommend you typing them into the little chat window that Jonathan alluded to, and let's see what folks have to say.
Thanks, Steve. And yeah, as Steve said, anybody who's got any questions, feel free to just type them into that question widget. We do have a few questions that have come in here, and so I'll start going through them. One of the questions that is related to monitoring says, Steve, can we import monitoring information from HP Loadrunner to NeoLoad?
If NeoLoad's has the ability to export data in a CSV file, a standard CSV file, then we should be able to. If it's a format that's proprietary to Loadrunner, then obviously we won't be able to get at that information. I don't know what their ability is, but our import engine essentially has a CSV file format. If you get the data in there, then NeoLoad can take it in, no problem.
Okay. Good. Steve, there was also interest expressed in seeing a small demo on mobile, I guess it's mobile application testing. You know, I don't think that was in scope for today, but if somebody wants to see a demo of how to test a mobile application using 4.1, what do you recommend? I know we have there's a recording of a mobile demo on our website.
And the other thing we could do is if folks just want to reach out to us, we could set something up. What I'd probably like to do is maybe, hate to admit it, use my webcam so I can show the mobile device being used and how it records, but that's something we could do easily. But I think it's probably better as an offline topic.
Yeah, and that sounds good. And if you want to get your hands on something really quick, I would point you to we do have a 4.1 mobile demo on the website. You can either access it directly from the mobile page, the mobile testing page, or you can go directly to the demos. If you just go to our website and then click on the NeoLoad drop-down, you'll see both the mobile page and you also see demos. And on the demo page, you'll just see the mobile demo. I think it's about 6 minutes, so it's obviously a pretty high level. Okay, what do we have next? Can we record the network conditions of a remote device to replay them during the tests, like latency, bandwidth, etc.?
Well, NeoLoad itself doesn't have any kind of stats on the network as we're doing recording, but if you have a kind of a network sniffer that would provide that information, you could certainly use it during the recording and then input that data into the WAN emulation piece of NeoLoad so that you are emulating that exact condition when you play your test back. I think that would be the approach I'd go with there.
Sure. Can we test native mobile applications from this device?
Well, remember when we are driving load, when we actually execute the load test, we're driving the the load against the application from our load generators. So the load generators are sitting on Windows boxes or Unix boxes, actually not sitting on the device itself, but by being able to record from the device and being able to emulate the network conditions, we'll account for all those factors when we play back our load tests. So we'll be testing the mobile application, but will not be driving the load from the device itself. A mobile device would never be able to scale and be able to support the amount of concurrent users we expect to.
Next question, do I need to get a separate license key for 4.1?
So yes, but it already is in your customer area. So NeoLoad 4.1 does require a separate license, but there's no additional charge. And so if you go to our website and log into the customer portal using your credentials, your customer credentials, under your license tab, the 4.1 license will be in there for you to download.
I think it's probably worth clarifying at this point. So of all the capabilities and features that Steve showed you, I think all but one is included in NeoLoad 4.1, included with your license. So what that means is for anybody with a valid support package, you can get all features except for the import monitoring data module. You can get all of those, at no cost. The import monitoring data module is a separate cost, I think, commensurate with the other monitoring modules.
So a couple of questions I see, I'm taking words out of your mouth, sorry, Jonathan. A couple of questions I see about the network emulation feature. That is included as part of NeoLoad 4.1. It does not require a license, a separate license.
And as the marketing guy chiming in, I'll tell you this is one of the things we're very excited about, because there's other products on the market where you have to have actually two separate tools that obviously require a separate license in order to have that WAN emulation capability along with the load and performance testing. So we encourage you all to take advantage of it. Steve says, thanks for the quick demo. Can I use my license to use the new feature of 4.1? I think you covered that. Yep. Let's see. Looking through here. Okay. Thanks, Dan. Dan mentioned that Loadrunner can export as a CSV. So back to that earlier question, it sounds like it would be possible to use the Loadrunner monitoring results and import them into NeoLoad via the CSV. What is the maximum limit on web and mobile virtual users? I guess max limit on web and mobile virtual users that 4.1 can test.
I guess we wish we knew. We've had people that have run tests into the hundreds of thousands of virtual users. The limitation is just the hardware capacity of one's load generation farm. So how many load generators that they have access to. Of course, using our cloud gives you almost unlimited ability, but the tool itself can scale to any load that you wish, and there's really no difference between mobile virtual users and web virtual users.
Okay. It seems like there's some more questions on giving more information on using the existing license with 4.1 will be helpful. I think you may have covered that, but I think if people have questions, obviously on the screen right now you can see the instructions for downloading 4.1 and beginning to use that. If you have questions about this process, for example, you don't have the opportunity to write it down, you can access the same instructions from the What's New page on the Neotis website. If there are any other licensing questions you have specifically, I think you could just reach out directly to Steve or to support, or you can also contact your account manager as well. Let's see. Okay, here's one. Is there the ability to monitor the network segment to model real conditions to set the variables that you set in the WAN emulation?
And that kind of goes along with the question that someone asked earlier, and there is not really any kind of network monitoring device within NeoLoad, but there are plenty of network packet sniffers out there that you could use, even open source ones that would allow you to get that data that you could then import to NeoLoad. But NeoLoad would not provide that data for you as part of the recording.
It might be worth mentioning, and I'm not sure if you actually did this during the demo, but mentioning the settings that are in there. So when you make the selection of networks, there is actually a predefined variables that have been
I'll do better than
defined.
that. I'll actually even show that screen again for folks that are interested in taking a look at it. So what we're talking about here is packet loss and latency. So it's these screens here. And as I mentioned, with the mobile devices, we've already sort of pre-programmed or pre-populated these fields with sort of data we've got from the field as to average values for these different kinds of connections.
Okay. Great. A question about, I think related to cloud, can we simulate load from different geolocations?
Absolutely, and how you attack that can be really up to you. If you have, if you work for an organization with access to different locations to be able to put the load generators in, then certainly you can take that approach. But probably more easy, certainly more turnkey, would be to use our cloud solution, where we have load generators sitting in dozens of locations around the globe. You'll be able to just instantaneously access them through our cloud portal, add them to your project, and so then when you generate your load as part of your load test, you'll be able to emulate load coming from those different geos. And we have load generators sitting in North America, East Coast, West Coast, Central. We've got South America, UK, Central Europe, Asia Pac, and I'm probably forgetting some other geos. And we're continuing to add more locations every couple of months. We're adding a few more.
Okay, thanks. This question sounds like a plant, but I swear to you it's not. But it seems like a decent segue. What are the advantages of NeoLoad over HP Loadrunner?
So in my view, okay, this is my personal spin on things. I personally have been using load testing tools for way longer than I care to admit. And here's what NeoLoad brings to the table. Here's why I came to Neotis a couple of years ago. First of all, ease of use. Because NeoLoad doesn't require you to write any code or learn a scripting language, and everything is done through a series of drop and drags and wizards, your scripting efforts will be significantly easier, significantly more productive, and you'll get so much more work done in a shorter amount of time. And we've got so many customers of ours that are former Loadrunner users that are using NeoLoad now that actually have given us case studies to say, I switched tools and I've seen a 40% or 35% increased productivity in terms of script development. So, as you know, as a tester, the most amount of time we spend is writing our user profiles, writing our scripts and customizing them. So, because it's so much easier to do in NeoLoad, that's a huge advantage. The second piece is NeoLoad's ability to keep up with technology, and we have support for every web technology, especially sort of the quote-unquote Web 2.0 or the RIA technologies that are out there. The other tools kind of fall behind. AJAX or asynchronous activities, push technologies are almost impossible to represent in the load runners of the world because they are protocol, the way they are protocol based. And one thing I also find about our development team is they're so much more proactive and reactive to new versions and new technologies. Speedy being a prime example of we're the first tool to be able to support that. When I worked for other vendors or tools that I used before, there was nothing worse than working with an application and asking the vendor, do you support this? And they tell you, oh, we aren't supporting that version for another 6 months now. Where NeoLoad, it's instantaneous. We've never had that delay. And then the WAN emulation piece that you see here, which is new to 4.1, is also brand new to a load testing tool. There's no other tool in the market that's going to have anything like this.
Okay. Thanks, Steve. And was actually one of our partners also pointed out the monitoring. Excellent monitoring with recommended points and thresholds is what I'm reading from Dan. Another question related to cloud. Do we need to buy a separate license for cloud? How does that work?
So there is not a separate license for the cloud. The cloud module is included in the license. However, the way that our cloud load generators work is you essentially pay for what you use. So instead of actually having to buy costly hardware for load testing that you might not use all the time because maybe you're only running load tests once a quarter or once every 6 months, doesn't make sense to buy hardware and have it collect dust. You can use our load generators in the cloud, but you pay for them as you use them. So essentially the way that works is you buy what we call cloud credits. And they're like tokens you put in the washing machine at the laundromat or in the video game arcade. And you actually consume cloud credits as you use the cloud load generator. So it's like it's depending upon the configuration, but in general, it's like per hour, per load generator, cost of cloud credit kind of thing. So you have a bucket of credits which will be consumed as you use the cloud load generators upon test time. If you ever run out of credits, you just buy a bunch more.
Thanks. Sorry, here's a question I was asked a while ago, and I just missed it in the pile. But how can we get some more information on tunnel mode recording?
That falls into the same question I think, Jonathan, someone asked about the recording from a mobile device. So I think if someone wants to take a look at the online mobile demo that you mentioned, that will talk about tunnel for sure. And then if it's not specific enough and someone wants to have a more in-depth conversation, they can reach out to myself or somebody on my team, and we'll set up a kind of a one-to-one discussion.
Okay. Great. And by the way, thanks to everyone who's staying with us for this Q&A with Steve. We've got another question here. It's on WAN emulation. The WAN emulation has to be enabled from the load generators. If this WAN emulation feature available in NeoLoad load generators UI. I think that's a question about how that feature is made available.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what the question is there either, Jonathan, but essentially when you change the settings in the controller, all those settings are pushed out to the load generators as well.
Okay. Okay. Great. Any mobile OS currently not supported in 4.1, and can we expect that in a future release?
Not that I'm aware of, but what I can do is I can open up the browser tab here and have you take a look at the, I guess I can't make this field bigger on my screen. Or go to me and decided to lock, here we go. So here are all the mobile devices currently. I'll scroll through this really quickly. If there's any that you think we should support that we don't have in here, certainly let us know so we can add the information. But you can see we've got basically the entire Droid set, iPhones, tablets, iPads. So that's on the sort of the device side in terms of customizing the user agent field and the current connection, concurrent connections on a device. And then finally, I'll show you the WAN emulation. And if you can think of a WAN or a wireless connection here that we haven't thought of, which I can't, and our developers can't, we should certainly be able to let us know that for sure.
But here's another good WAN question. If modeling network segments, do you need one load generator per network segment you want to emulate? You
know, Dan, I'm not sure the answer to that question. I'll have to talk to the dev guys on the WAN side and get an answer to report back to you on that.
I think my understanding on that one actually is that I think the answer is no, just because of some of the documentation I was reading, but I haven't experimented with that myself. Okay. I think we've covered the bulk of the questions here, but if there's any other questions, let me see. Let's go through the list. I think we've gotten to most of the questions here. You know, I think that's probably a good point for us to wrap it up. What I would say is, obviously, if you have any additional questions that we didn't get to, or that we missed in the list here, please feel free to reach out to any of us directly. Myself, Jonathan Bracken, you can reach out to me or to Steve Weisfeld, anyone on the support team, and obviously if you have licensing questions, you can reach out directly to your account executive. Again, in terms of resources that might be useful, we do have some more description of the features on the What's New page. Additionally, that's where you can download this Quick Start Guide that you see in the slides that Steve's got up right now. The Quick Start Guide, I think, is quite good and gives you screenshots and more detailed description of the features and how to use them. So I recommend checking that out, and obviously let us know if there's anything more we can answer for you. So with that, Steve, thank you very much for this presentation, and to our audience, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your business.